Well, hello anyway. And one of the things that I was thinking about what to talk to you about this sort of last session really was what does it mean to say hello to each other? What is that? And I was looking at about the word hello. And I think it means good health. It also means oi you, apparently. But there's something about wishing each other good health when you meet each other for the first time that's really wonderful. And so hello, good health. And there's also the other, I like how other cultures do it as well. It's quite nice. I like shalom and salam, which is peace. Peace to you, which is wonderful, to wish each other peace. And also, from my own parents' background, which is Hindu, is namaste, which is absolutely beautiful, isn't it? Which is from the God in me to the God in you. The good in me to the good in you. And I think that's quite nice. So hello, namaste. Can I start?
No, sorry, I haven't got it.
Oh.
I'm trying to download it.
What am I going to do? Well, luckily for me, Rob really gave my talk, which was, so that was wonderful. He did all the public health stuff, which is really great, and talked about life expectancy, which was fantastic. So I'm just going to say what he said, which is brilliant. And basically, what he said was there are 14 years of life difference between the richest people in Kent and the poorest people in Kent. That's 14 years of life. That's the difference between seeing your grandchildren grow up and not seeing your grandchildren grow up. And I thought that's quite a sobering thought, really, and that's about health. And I thought, these people aren't dying of poverty. They're not dying of being poor. What they're dying of is coronary heart disease, cancer, and lung problems. That's what people are dying of. And I'm really fascinated as to how that outside world gets inside your body. So how does all the stresses of strains of life, of not being able to pay your bills, worrying about, whether you pay your mortgage or if you're having arguments with your wife or your husband, how's that all getting actually inside your body to turn into coronary heart disease, cancer, and lung problems? Yay! Fantastic. Hello again. And there, look, life and death. That's what he said. And I was really fascinated in this idea of the stress response system. Do you know about this? You very clever people here. The corticosteroid response system. So this hormone that is produced from the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal glands, when we see danger. We're a fantastically adapted species. We're designed to either run away or to fight. And we're actually really adapted to stress because small bursts of it are really good for us. So we like horror movies and going on rides and running marathons and things like that. But what we're not very well adapted for is constant bursts of long-term cortisol that suddenly burst out of us in a constant form and go into our blood. When it goes into your blood, gets into your metabolism, affects your blood sugar and your blood pressure. And there you have your life expectancy graphs. So that's how the world gets inside us. And it's bad enough when we're adults and we're dealing with these long-term stresses. Constant cortisol. But imagine when you're a small child. I mean, you were 3, I think, when you started experiencing some of that stuff. It was sleep, I noticed. Sleep deficits. And imagine you're a small child and the dramatic effects of that cortisol on your body. If a kid is brought up in a chaotic environment, and do we know about adverse childhood experiences? Hopefully this is becoming much more understood. Childhood adverse circumstances may be parents with drug or alcohol issues, instability of care, poor housing, living in an aggressive environment, young bereavement. The ideal environment is nurturing and love and boundaries. When that's knocked out, this constant flood of cortisol becomes the biological environment of the body, and that stress on a child's brain can be quite catastrophic. So at an early stage, that brain will be undeveloped, linking it to weaker defense mechanisms. Anyone heard of the Whitehall studies? Marmot's Whitehall studies? So this was a 10-year longitudinal study from 1967 to 1977. And basically it was about coronary heart disease in Whitehall. And it's a very hierarchical place. And what they basically found was the lower status you were, the earlier you died of coronary heart disease. And that's about status. So what is that mechanism? Why is it that status becomes so important to us? And I'm recapping, really, from all of the talks that we've heard today. I've heard the word shame, feeling of failure, feeling embarrassed. All of these have a resulting chemical that goes into our body to make us feel emotions. Here's some data. Poor men are 3 times more likely to have mental disorders. Rates of depression double with people who are sick and ill. People who don't have close friends and family are more likely to experience mental health problems. People who feel marginalised in society, perhaps you may be black or an ethnic minority, or you may be gay or bisexual. Again, somehow you don't feel normal. Somehow that leads to an experience of something not being right. You know, sticks and stones don't break your bones, but names can't hurt you. We know that's not true now. We know that actually we can internalize, and actually this is what shame does to us, and it goes inside your body and turns into toxic chemicals, and it can come out in health outcomes. We can't separate the mind and body. They are one thing. Here are some numbers to remember. 700 per second. That's the number of new neuronal connections that babies make. It's amazing. We're so neuroplastic. 18 months. That's the age in which you can first see health inequalities in speech in young children. 90 to 100% is the chance of developmental delays when a child has experienced 6 or 7 adverse social experiences. It's going to happen. It's an inevitability. I bet every single person who's homeless has had childhood adverse experiences. 3 to 1. That's the odds of heart disease in adulthood when those children grow up. What's the antidote? My favourite animals. I like primates. We are primates. And the antidote's grooming and love and oxytocin. So when we hug each other, when we hold each other, even when we talk to each other and when we say nice things to each other, we start to produce oxytocin. Oxytocin is that same sort of chemical, I think, that you have when you breastfeed, but also when we fall in love. It's oxytocin. That's the antidote. And here are some macaques, and they're grooming each other. And hairdressers, actually, strangely enough, have the best mental well-being of any profession. You can understand why, because they're touching each other. And we have a way of touching each other symbolically because we're sort of such a brainy species, and we touch each other with words and symbols and inspiration. I can't stand here and pretend that everything is preventable. I may be a public health consultant, but not all mental health problems are. But there are some things that we can do to look after our mental health, and that's what I've been asked to talk about here today. Mental well-being and resilience. My first boyfriend, actually, really reminded me of Johnny. Don't worry, you're safe. And had very similar, very, very similar background to you, and had a huge amount of adverse life experiences when he was a kid. We split up when we were 23 years old, and very recently, 27 years later, we met each other again, actually. And very sadly, he had become an alcoholic and actually was very ill. And I invited him to stay with me. And at Christmas, he said to me, "You know, Jess, nothing makes any sense to me. I don't think I've got what it takes to live this life. I'm not very good at life," he said. "Is it really worth it?" So when I saw this slide, I thought, wow, that's exactly what he said to me. Because that's what it means to have a sense of coherence, for our lives to have meaning. And luckily, thanks to services, he's in rehab now, which is really good, so we wish him well, right? Maybe he'll get that sense of coherence. Maybe it is worth it. Because that's what it takes to be resilient. The ability to cope with all of those challenges, to adapt to adversity. What's the definition of resilience? Successful adaptation to the life's tasks in the face of social disadvantage or highly adverse conditions. And high levels of resilience and well-being don't just link to mental health problems. They can also be very good for learning and academic achievement, absence from work due to illness, reduce risk-taking behaviours like smoking or overeating, improve physical health, increased community involvement. So rather than look at deficits all the time, I really like what Johnny said there. You know, someone saying, yeah, you can do it. Let's look at what's positive about you. Let's look at what you can do. But it can't just come from inside us. It's got to be all of us. It's got to be the world that we live in. So we've got to have supportive policies. One of the things my friend who stayed with me at Christmas said that was very poignant, he said, this is a really important Christmas for me because last year I was homeless. I was on the streets. I slept in a graveyard in the snow. We need supportive policies. Homeless housing first. We don't want to put up with the rough sleeping anymore. We don't want that to happen. We want a supportive environment. Build more houses. Somebody said that earlier. You know, why aren't we doing that? But the services do need to be there to catch us. Health services need to link up to social services and community services. And then we are the social support. We are here for each other. And maybe, just maybe then, that we can stand next to somebody on the bridge and say, you know what, you'll make it. You'll be all right. It'll get better. Health's a property which emerges when we live in a civilized society. We are that society. We are the people on the bridge with each other. We all know this, don't we? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All learnt about it. And it just goes to show what we need before we get to love and belonging, and then we can reach esteem and self-actualization. Just wanted to remind us, really. It's quite pretty, isn't it? So we have those prolonged, non-judgmental relationships that actually build trust. We can learn that there are alternative ways of living, in fact, and that we can make a choice. It doesn't feel like we have a choice sometimes. And then we can support others. And we can choose what kind of world that we create. A nice, safe world with nice, tidy houses. And this looks far too nice and clean for me to live in. I think I'd like to live in that one. But we can choose, you know. You can decide. A little bit of chaos, what's wrong with that? But as long as you can have fun and cope with it. Are we a compassionate society, I wonder? It's quite interesting. In 2003, most people thought that Britain was a less compassionate society than a decade ago. Do you think that we're a less compassionate society than we were 10 years ago? I don't know. But I bet you everyone in this room would put their hands up and say, yes, I am a compassionate person. I think so. So it's interesting, isn't it, that actually the power is inside us. Power, that's a really interesting word. If we're not plugged into power, we feel powerless. And then we can feel listless and unwell. But what does it mean to empower somebody else? Does that empower you as well as a person? Positivity, respect, patience. Pretty much all of the characteristics you were talking about when you were describing Neil. So that we can feel safe and supported and strengthened. Is Loretta still here? Yes. Hello, Loretta. I put this up for you because I remember a conversation with Loretta when she sort of ran down to me, Jess, you've got to support this project. It's called Singing for Health. And Canterbury Christchurch really need public health support. And I was going, of course we'll support it. Singing for Health. And they've got some fantastic research saying how good singing together is for your physical and mental health. Brilliant stuff. And there's a lot of research out there now saying all the things that help your well-being. Oh, did you want that one? And, of course, we've summarised the evidence in our sort of a nice infographic, which is called the 6 Ways to Wellbeing. Nationally, I think we use 5 ways to wellbeing, but in Kent, we like somewhat like Spinal Tap. We like to go to 11, just one more, because we're rural and we've got nice nature around us, so we added that one. And the evidence behind these 6 ways to well-being. Be active. We know that if you're physically active people are some of the most well, both physically and mentally. Keep learning. Continued formal and informal learning has been found to be associated with greater individual and subjective well-being. Giving, volunteering, that improves our well-being, extends healthy life. We've talked a lot about connection. Happiness spreads. People whose social contacts are happy also become happy. And we can influence happiness in each other. Take notice. Again, I'm just saying what you said, really, aren't I? I mean, that mindfulness, noticing things outside yourself. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it helps you to self-regulate. And then the one that we added, take care of your planet. Give something back. Leave it in a better place than it was when you found it, in whichever way you can. And actually, being in nature, there's good evidence to show that helps with fatigue, mental fatigue, and helps us be more resilient. So, I want to end by making a well-being pledge. I think we can all do that. What one thing will you do to look after yourself tonight and tomorrow? Have a think about that for a second and really pledge, this is what I'm going to do to look after I'm going to go to bed early, actually. I never go to bed early. But I'm going to go to bed early tonight. And what thing will you do to look after someone else tonight? However small that is. A phone call, a text, are you okay? Pledge it. And as you're leaving, tell somebody what you're going to do. I think it would be a really nice way to connect with the people in the room as well. Thank you.